A Trip into the Darkness. Chapter 30. After Andres left the house, the amulet seemed to calm down and was satisfied with Mallory for declining the offer to stay on the island. She could feel how restless the thing was to leave and be on the road again. It kept whispering to her that it had sat dormant for long enough in its existence, and it would not keep waiting. It was ready for her to kill more so it could play in the blood of her victims. Rubbing her temples, Mallory wanted to finish her breakfast, but the amulet had ruined her appetite for reminding her of her crimes. Standing up from the table, she thanked Sophia for the meal and was fixing to leave when Sophia asked if she had any laundry she wanted her to wash. Mallory thought about the dirty clothes she had worn for a month straight and decided she wanted nothing to do with those blood-stained reminders of her savagery. No, those clothes should be burned, and part of her wished that she too could burn as she thought about the deaths she had caused. In the old days, death by fire would have been a respectable way for a sinner to die, and would be considered a way to cleanse the soul of those who had worked with the devil. Picking up the new stuff Andres had given her at breakfast, she went up to the library. Opening the door to the balcony, she sat down at the white table and opened the laptop. It quickly turned on and opened to the home screen, which had a picture of the ocean. Feeling nervous, she pressed on the internet and typed in her college on the search bar. Once she was on the website, she signed in and waited for it to load up her classes. When she saw they were whited out and couldn't click on them, she went to her email. She had a lot of unopened ones. Clicking on one, the email informed her that since she had missed a full week without checking in or logging into her classes, she had been dropped. However, since it was still early in the semester, her report card would show a W for withdrawing versus an F for failing. Opening another email, she found it from her advisor, saying that he hoped that she was well and asking if she planned to sign up for the next semester. She would have to retake the classes she had been withdrawn from, but half of her tuition had been returned to her since she had withdrawn before the deadline. Checking the date on her computer, she felt a moment of shock. She had only been gone 6 weeks. A month and a half, that's it, and a month of that time she had been on the run. Looking at the calendar, fall classes began at the end of August. So she still had a full month before they started back. What Andres had told her at breakfast replayed in her mind. If she stayed here on the island, she could sign back up and pretend as nothing had happened. She could finish her degree, and now that she wasn't working full-time, she could start writing in her spare time. Her life did not have to be over. She could publish all her stories and become the successful author that she had always dreamed of being. The thing in her neck started humming, and it grew hot for the first time ever. Hissing, Mallory reached up and tried to unlatch the thing from her neck as it started burning her. However, there was no latch anywhere on the chain. Crying out in pain, Mallory yanked at the amulet with all her might, but it did no good. It was as if the thing had welded itself onto her somehow and was not coming off. When the burning increased and pain shot down her spine, she cried out as images of blood and carnage played in her vision. It was showing her what it wanted to do to the world, or perhaps it was showing her the blood and carnage of the people she had already slaughtered herself. "I won't stay. Please stop hurting me. I won't stay. I promise," she pleaded, and as suddenly as the pain and burning started, it stopped. Mallory panted and her hands shook violently. Licking her dry lips, her vision started to clear. Black spots flickered, and a headache was throbbing behind her eyes, but she could at least see around her now that the pain was gone, which had momentarily blinded her. Pushing the images of the dead from her mind took effort. She couldn't think about them right now, or she might start crying and never stop. She was still shaking as she shut the laptop and stood up to pace. She felt sick and upset. How could Andres dangle this in front of her? It was not fair. No matter how badly she might want to stay, she knew she did not have a choice. The skin around her neck hurt as if she'd been burned. Reaching up to touch the skin, she felt blisters and welts around her neck. As she thought about going to the Amazon River and finding the cure, she knew her life would still be over. Even if she were human again, that didn't mean that Troy would stop chasing her. He would still find her, and then he would just turn her again. If the cure made it so she would forever be human, then he would more than likely just kill her when he realized she was no longer useful to him. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life on the run when obviously she could survive happily and sane without his blood keeping her alive. Mallory wondered why the witch in New Orleans had avoided telling her that any natural-born's blood could keep her alive, and not just her master's. She did not want to keep running. She did not want to face another unfamiliar country and fall back into a starving savage. Mallory hissed when the amulet at her neck became hot again, and its anger and malice shot through her, making her body jerk. "You must keep going, Mallory. We made a deal. I kept you alive, and you take me to the jungle. There is no way out of this." The thing's voice was clear as day in her mind. It sounded neither male nor female. It was cold and ancient, and brought goosebumps to her skin. Sitting down on the leather couch, she thought about what it said. It was angry with her for even considering not taking it to the jungle. The thing didn't care about the cure, but there was something down there that it desperately wanted to be reunited with. Rubbing her temples, Mallory tried to figure out what she was going to do. Maybe she could try cutting the thing off her neck. A shot of pain went through her like the thing hurt her and was angry that she would dare think that. It whispered to her that the only way it would leave her body was if someone cut off her head. Flinching, Mallory realized the witch had definitely not told her enough about the necklace before giving it to her. Standing up, she went back out to the balcony and sat down. Opening the white bag, she pulled out the journal Andres had also given her. It was dark leather, like her other one. Holding it in her hands, she realized she had never told him she kept a journal. It was also very suspicious that it was the same design and style as the journal she had carried with her in her backpack. Had he somehow found her old journal and read it? No, she thought. He would not have invaded her privacy like that. That is, when it dawned onto her that he had said she might want another one. How had he known that she kept a journal in the first place? Her emotions were all over the place as she imagined him reading it. She hadn't even dared to read what she had written when she was out of her mind with bloodlust. She had avoided touching it since she got on the island because she was afraid of what might be inside. Storming out of the library, she went to her borrowed bedroom. Inside, she found her backpack and opened it to pull out her old journal. Lifting it to her face, she closed her eyes and inhaled. Sure enough, it was faint, but she could just make out Andres' scent. That fucking asshole! He had gone through her things at some point and must have read her journal. Mallory's heart was racing as she opened the leather book and started scanning through the content inside. As she skimmed the pages, her stomach dropped. She literally sounded like an insane person for the vast majority of the writing. She had no recognition of writing about 95% of the material, and if it hadn't been in her handwriting, she would have sworn it hadn't been her ramblings. The things inside were dark and twisted. There were so many pages where she raged on about the blood being the poison and the cure, babbling on that she needed the red life force and was ready to kill for it, along with bragging about the numerous people she had already killed so she could have what she so desperately craved. There were parts where she described tearing into her victims and ripping at their flesh. The spray of their blood was faster this way and far more satisfying. After ripping at their flesh while she held them down and they screamed, she would spit on their skin and feast on their wondrous blood, letting it soak into her. Holy Mother of God, she was a monster. How could this have been her? She knew she had killed, but she didn't think that she had been enjoying it and feeling the excitement from her victims' struggles, let alone mangling their body while she tore at their flesh. She really should have killed herself in the ocean in Florida all that time ago. It would have saved so many lives and so much pain. At the beginning of the journal, there were a few sections where she talked about craving to be fucked and needing someone to take her hard. However, about a quarter of the way through the journal, she quit caring about sex and her libido. Throwing the book across the room, she stood there with her fists clenched. He had no right to look through that, and for him to have the audacity to give her another journal that he would more than likely try seeking out when he was bored was enraging. Another thought struck her then. Her pills were missing. Did he have something to do with their disappearance? She would need them again when she left, which apparently she didn't have a choice in the matter according to the evil necklace at her throat. She could envision him taking her pills, deeming that she did not need them, while considering himself her handler. He had put on such a good show the past 2 days, but he wasn't much better than Troy. 2 days. She had only known him for barely 2 days, and already she felt a weird connection and bond with him. It had to be his blood affecting her, making her feel like she needed him. Or maybe it was Stockholm Syndrome. She had feared that with Troy, that he had been infecting her in ways. Now, something similar was happening with Andres. Only this time, her concrete box had been traded in for a glass house set upon a beach island. Perhaps she was a weaker being than she had thought, if she kept craving the touch of her captors. Biting her lips, she tasted her blood. She should try and escape now, but she wanted to confront Andres before she left. She would wait till he got home and then leave later tonight or tomorrow. She decided as she made her way back up to the library to sulk and smoke more of her herbs. Tilda. The day was a blur for Mallory. She had hidden out in the library for the vast majority of it and only went downstairs when lunch was ready. Sophia had tried talking to her, but Mallory hadn't been able to pay attention to the conversation and was not in the mood to be social. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, she was ready for a fight. The door to the house opened, and Andres' energy hit her. She gritted her teeth in anticipation. Currently, she was sitting on the leather couch in the living room, waiting for him to walk in. When he stepped through the doorway, he smiled at her, but his smile fell when she didn't smile back. "What's wrong, Mallory?" he asked with genuine concern in his voice. Annoyance went through her that he was able to simply take one look at her and sense her mood. "How did you know I kept a journal?" she demanded as she stood up from the couch. Andres rubbed his hands through the scruff on his face before he answered her. "When you were passed out on the plane, I found it in your things." "You're just going to admit to violating my privacy and snooping through my belongings like a creep? How much of it did you read?" She felt tears burning in the back of her eyes, and that just made her angrier. He had no right to be able to affect her emotions like this. "Of course I will admit it. I will never lie to you." And with that, he stopped talking and just stood there. "Well, mister, I won't lie either. How much did you read?" "All of it." She wanted to throttle him. She also wanted to run away so she would never have to look at him again. He knew what a monster she was, and he had been socializing with her and pretending to act nice. He knew she was a cold killer. How had he been able to look her in the eye and laugh with her, knowing what she really was? "I needed to know something about you. You were so far gone when I found you passed out in the streets, and I wanted to know what I was dealing with." "Dealing with? What the fuck is that supposed to mean, Andres? I'm not your new pet and that you rescued from the streets of Mexico. I'm a person. Did you take my pills, too?" she asked. He looked away from her before saying, "You shouldn't be taking those. They are harmful for your mind and body. You need blood, not heroin or artificial opioids." "You self-entitled jerk. Do you think you can just stash me away on this damn island and tell me what I can and can't do? Well, I'm leaving tonight. You can give me a ride on your fancy boat or plane, or else I will swim to Colombia. I don't fucking care, but I'm leaving." She growled at him, and he looked back at her, taking a step towards her. He looked desperate. Shoving his hands in his pockets, he responded, "You're not leaving, Mallory. Not tonight." "Why not? Why do you act like you care if I stay or go? Do you think you own me? Because I can assure you, you do not fucking own me. No one does," she shouted. "I do not want to own you, beautiful girl, but I don't want to lose you either." "Why not?" Mallory yelled at him as her lower lip started to tremble. She wanted so badly to be livid and angry, but the argument was making her feel weak and needy. The exact opposite of what she should be feeling. Andres took another step closer to her, and his energy flowed into her body, making her feel warm and safe. Without her consent, her body leaned towards him, desperate for his touch. "Because I want you. All of you, body and soul," he whispered. Tears slid down her face at his confession. Standing there, staring into his beautiful golden brown eyes, she tried to figure out why he would say that to her. He had read about the horrible things she had done. He had seen her at her very worst. She couldn't even remember meeting him because she had been so far gone, but she had a feeling it wasn't a pretty interaction. How could he say he wanted her? There was either something really wrong with him, or he too was a monster. She wanted to hate him for saying that to her and for messing with her emotions. He had no right to play with her like this. "How can you say that when we barely even know each other?" she asked, then bit her bottom lip as she tried to stop the flow of tears. She was tainted and dirty. Her body might be clean, but her soul was stained black from the blood and death of her many victims. With a growl, he took another long stride towards her and captured her face with his hands before bringing her lips to his. The world seemed to stop spinning as their lips connected, and she parted her mouth for him. His breath was warm, and his hands completely encircled her face and head. As his tongue moved into her mouth, she felt like she might fall over, but one of his hands left her face to wrap around her waist, pulling her body tight against his. He kissed her like he was drowning, and Mallory is the only one that could give him the oxygen his body desperately needed. As they explored each other's mouth, there was nothing else in the world besides them. When Andres broke their kiss for air, Mallory was lightheaded and her body was on fire. She was aching between her legs, and her mouth was throbbing for his flesh. He looked into her eyes as they both panted, and a small piece of reality came back to her at that moment. She slapped him in the face. With a grunt, he leaned his head back, and she brought her hands up to his chest to push him away from her. Andres dropped his arm from around her waist, allowing her to move away from him. She felt so cold without his hands on her, but she wouldn't let that stop her. She could not allow him to make her feel this way. Not when she would inevitably have to turn around and leave him. That thought made her eyes burn again. It felt like all the tears she hadn't allowed herself to cry when she was Troy's captive were bombarding her now. "Just leave me alone. I don't want to see you anymore," she told him, then turned around and ran upstairs to her borrowed bedroom. Inside, she slammed the door shut. As soon as it latched, cold fear shot through her body. Before she could stop herself, she ripped the door back open. She must be damaged if something as simple as a closed door made her go ice cold with terror. Backing away from it, she felt the tears stream down her face. She didn't know what she was going to do. She had to leave, and that thought made her sad. Going to the bathroom, she drew herself a hot bath in the claw tub. While it filled, she stripped from her clothes before getting in. She allowed herself to slowly sink into the bottom of the hot water, where she tried to hide from her thoughts. The heat scalded her skin. She rejoiced in the pain, loving how it burned. Mallory did not want to think about all the people she had slaughtered, but the images that the necklace had shown her earlier that day kept creeping back into her mind. Faces and blood, and she could even hear their screams. She hadn't realized how many victims she had acquired during her weeks of being strung out, but according to the damn journal in the necklace, it had been a lot. It was sick that she had written about what it felt like to witness the energy of her victims leave their bodies. They just seemed to disappear, and that's how she knew they were dead. It was not that their heart quit beating or that they stopped fighting. No, sometimes their heart would be stopped for minutes before their soul left their body. How had she not remembered that? How could she have been so evil and not even realized it? She had thought she was doing good and that she was sane, but it was a lie. She hadn't been sane, and after she left here, if she didn't make it to the Amazon River fast enough, she was going to turn back into the mindless demon, killing without a thought or any remorse. No wonder Andres told her he had read her journal to try and figure out what he was dealing with. She didn't even remember getting on his plane or what they had talked about until he gave her his blood. She wondered if she had been close to dying at that point. For the things she had done, she should be dead now. This must have been what he meant about being damned. She didn't believe in hell, but if there was one, she would be the first one in. She had even tried justifying her kills in the journal, saying that they were all bad people. She didn't believe that. There weren't that many bad people in the world, and even if there were, she wouldn't have found them by simply walking around the streets, waiting for someone to approach her. The people she had murdered could have been approaching her to ask if she needed help, or if she was lost. She felt like such a monster. Probably because that's what she was. When the water turned cold, Mallory got out. Walking back into the room, she looked out the windows. The sun was just starting to sink over the ocean. Biting her lip, she looked around and found the black nightie. After she pulled it on, she crawled into bed. She was tired from crying and was depressed. Curling up in a ball under the covers, she closed her eyes and hoped for a peaceful and long sleep.